Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Y'all-ticks. You're already throwing your arms up here because I'm not looking at the camera?
No, we almost started talking exactly at the same time again. I paused.
Welcome back to Y'all-ticks here. We're at a fun place we've never been to. And
You've never been to.
I've
been here.
I'm not the drunk that you are. I don't show up all the time.
I get out and about.
Evidently you do, and they invited you back, which is really interesting.
Very surprising.
They invited us back.
Usually places don't do that with me. We're at Community Beer Company. It is in Dallas, not far from downtown Dallas. If you're familiar with like the medical district in Dallas, it's just across the freeway from that, and fairly close to the design district there in Dallas.
Yeah, and you're having the strawberry shortcake ale, is that right?
I am not. It was a good guess, though. It did tempt me when I was up there.
Because of the fruit?
Yeah. I'm having the Legion Russian Imperial Stout that they make here, and you have to... This is like
syrup.
This is like a sipping beer.
Yeah.
It is a 10% alcohol by volume beer. What are you having?
I'm having the Haus beer.
Okay, so
I don't speak German, but it's the Haus beer, Hausbier.
That was pretty good, actually.
It's a Pilsner.
And you've had Community Beer many times, but it's always been in the cans that they sell.
And you guys, I know people, I'm sure, have seen this. Community Beer is super popular. A few years ago, they had the funnel cake ale at the state fair.
I have not had that.
It's it looks like a Pilsner. It tastes just like funnel cake. How they inject or insert the flavor into that is
I should have tried that one. And I don't know if you know this. I know you're a whiskey man. They distill their own spirits here, too.
Really?
Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
You're
the regular here, man. You're teaching me a lot.
I'm an invite back kind of guy, and so I know some things. It's called Society Spirits. They make vodka, whiskey, agave, I think they have to call it that, which is like really tequila.
Sure.
And now they're in the process of making gin and rum, too.
Wow. The spirit knowledge you have is really impressive here. We should just turn this over. If we didn't have a great guest here today,
we should move on, right?
Let's get to it here. We have State Rep Jared Patterson with us today. And is that a spirit in there? What are you having, Jared?
Man, I'm just having water today. I've got a long drive ahead of me around the state to help support our great candidates running for re-election in the Texas House.
And you've been out doing it. So State Rep Patterson is a Republican from Frisco, from North Texas. And as we were talking about what to do with the podcast this week, we already had some ideas what we wanted to do. And as we're having the conversation, I get a text. And it's Representative Patterson. He's saying, we got to talk about X, Y, and Z sometime. I said, well, hey, let's talk about it now in this episode.
How about this week?
Because this is perfect. We're already talking about these issues. Let's get into it here.
Well, what did you want to talk about? I wasn't on this text. What was in the text?
Man, you got to give me your cell phone number. I'll start blowing you up every once in a while.
Just start spamming me with ideas of what we can talk about.
Hey, before we get going, though, so Wheeler and I are on a text. Wheeler sends me inappropriate things a lot on these texts and talks a lot of trash and stuff like that. But you guys are on texts too, which people probably don't realize. A lot of lawmakers are on a text where you're talking behind the scenes about things going on and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we all share information, and especially right now when it's campaign season, mainly about some of the lies and things that are being said about different candidates, different incumbent candidates around the state of Texas. It's the same handful of people that are funding all of these lies all over the state. We all share the same information. We all see it so that we know what's going to hit before it hits.
Well, wait. So there's lies before election season. That's not a big shock to anybody, I don't think. Is it more so than usual?
It is, and look, I realize that politics are politics, but at the end of the day, what we're seeing this cycle is beyond the pale for what we've seen in, at least since I've been involved over the last decade or so. For example, Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, which is one of these, fake C4 groups that
now, what do you mean fake C4?
Well, so you've got these guys that are funding these groups, and they change their name all the time. It was Defend Texas Liberty PAC. They had the 7-hour meeting with the Nazi guy. We all said, whoa, that's, completely egregious. There's no way at all you should do that. So they go and change their name. I forget what the new name is.
Texans for a Conservative Majority or something like that. United for a Conservative Majority.
But they've got all these little groups like Texans for Vaccine Choice, Texans for Strong Borders, Texas Family Project. Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, with great conservative sounding names, but it's all the same 5 people that run each one of these. And they do that so that they can try to trick voters into saying, look, we're conservatives and we're supporting, this rogue candidate over here. And oh, by the way, your incumbent has voted to raise their pension this year. Well, no, we didn't. And in fact, I reached out to ERS, the administrator of the pension system.
The employment retirement system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I reached out and said, when was the last time the legislature voted to raise the pension? 2013. Most of us weren't even in the legislature, yet mailers and text messages are going out all over the state of Texas saying your legislator voted to raise their pension this cycle. And that's just, the first of many that we're seeing around the state that are just straight up lies to the public.
Well, let's talk about that, because the groups we talked about, Defend Texas Liberty, Texans for United Conservative Majority, something like that's the brand new name. These are funded by Tim Dunn, Ferris Wilks, West Texas oil billionaires who made their money in fracking a decade or so ago. These guys are funding a lot of this now. These guys have made a lot of news. They're backing Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, Greg Abbott, Dan Patrick, and a number of others. But give us some examples of what you're seeing, because this has a lot of lawmakers talking with the mailers that are going out leading up to the March 5th primary. You're not the only one I've heard from who's like, this is insane.
It's completely insane. There's another one that they're sending out saying that incumbent lawmakers support and give money to people that transition gender, for children. I don't know how to say that because it's not really a thing, but they're saying, oh, this lawmaker supports, these hospitals that do gender modification. We banned child gender modification, both surgeries and drugs this session, but yet they are just outright lying and saying that this lawmaker did that. They're saying that about great conservative lawmakers like Jeff Leach and, Kronda Timish and others, around the Metroplex, that absolutely don't stand for that. And in fact, their voting records don't reflect that.
And there's nothing that you can do about this, is there, or is there?
Well, look, it's a First Amendment issue. I will say that the Texans for Fiscal Responsibility mailer about the pensions, they don't even put a political disclaimer down there. I think one of the things that we've got to do this next session, if it can pass the Senate, is put some stronger ethics reforms in place to make sure that, look, you can say, you've got a First Amendment right to say whatever you want to say, but if you're not going to put the appropriate disclaimer so that we know who is actually paying for it, that should be a bigger problem. Right now, these groups just thumb their nose at the Texas Ethics Commission.
And if you're a candidate, regardless of where you sit on issues, if they're coming after you, you're up against a torrent of money.
Oh yeah, it's basically unlimited. And what happens is they find these misfit toys to run for office that no one would
these
invest
misfit
in.
Toys?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like this David Lowe that's running against Stephanie Click for the second time in Tarrant County. Yeah. These guys that no one would invest in, no one would actually get behind, no real grassroots movement would get behind these people, yet they sign up for office and they immediately have $100,000, $200,000 campaign plus in direct spending, plus the ancillary spending of all these fake C4 groups that are providing air support for these candidates.
But
so they become a legitimate candidate.
What's behind it, though? If they're trying to force out a conservative member and get somebody who, if you look at the continuum, is even further to the right in many cases, what is the point of it? What are they after?
Yeah, see, and I disagree that they're further to the right. I really don't. Like the media a lot of times will say, this conservative group, Defend Texas Liberty PAC or whatever. It's like, I was ranked the #1 conservative in the Texas House during the regular session this cycle. You're not getting to the right of me, on most of these issues, on any of these issues probably. And yet they tried to pull an opponent up for me for the same reason. It's not about right versus left. It's about I call them anti-Republicans, but ultimately what it's about is money. These guys, these group of 5 people that run all of these groups, they make a boatload of cash every election cycle. They make a percentage on every mailer that goes out, every text that goes out, every Facebook ad, every TV commercial. So the more people that they can get to run in the Republican primaries, the more that they can convince people that there is a problem in the Texas House, and they get people to sign up and run for office, then boom, there's mail pieces, there's text messages, and they get a cut of every single one of them.
And so this is, make sure our listeners and our viewers understand this. This is Republican versus Republican. We're not even talking about Democrats at all here. This is strictly RVR. Who's the group of five? I mentioned two names. Who are the others?
Yeah, I can't even think of all their names, but it's like Luke Macias is one. You've heard him. Jonathan Stickland, the disgraced former state rep who served 8 years. Certainly, I can't even think of their names. I'd know if I saw them.
But then you have
Tony McDonald. You see their names on a lot of these forms that they have to fill out. I mean, it's all the same 5 or 6 names.
Well, let me ask you. You don't have an opponent for the primary, which is March 5th here, but aren't you? Why are you speaking out? I mean, aren't you concerned that you might be targeted in 2 years?
Well, and I have been. My first session, I was ranked the 8th most conservative member of the Texas House, and they drew me a primary opponent and had one person invest a lot of cash to try to defeat me. And look, I'm probably going to have a primary opponent next time as a result of this, but somebody has to defend the House and the House members and the truth about what's going on here in politics. People need to know that the days of just, ignoring my opponent and, keeping on my message, that is important, but you also need people to come alongside you and say, no, this is crap. These are lies. These people are lying. Here's the facts about what happened. Because the candidates themselves, if they're explaining, they're losing. The attention span for the average voter is not long enough for you to be able to do it. So I feel, the responsibility to come out and help defend my colleagues who I've been in the trenches with, reducing abortions from 50,000 abortions in Texas to 34, not 34,000, 34. Passing constitutional carry, passing the strongest border legislation in the nation, the largest property tax cut in the nation, all of these massive conservative wins since Dade Fuentes became Speaker of the House. I'm proud of that record. I'm happy to go scream that from the rooftops, but I also want to defend my colleagues because we have been in the trenches together.
Well, and yet we hear that from this group that you don't call them, the far right or anything like that, but we hear from this group that Dade Fuentes and others are rhinos, Republicans in name only. Is that true?
No, Dade Fuentes and the Texas House has led the most conservative agenda in the country. I mean, some of the wins that we have are not just, these are good things that happen. It's literally legacy wins that no other state has ever come close to. The largest property tax cut in the history of the nation. The first state to have a heartbeat act that actually withstood Supreme Court scrutiny. Ended abortion in Texas, essentially ended abortion in Texas. The strongest election security laws in the nation we passed under Dade Fuentes' watch. Issue after issue after issue. Protecting kids, we passed like half a dozen bills, protecting kids from sexually explicit drag shows, protecting kids from porn in schools, protecting kids from gender modification, saving women's sports in UIL 7th grade through high school and in college in Texas, saving women's sports from male competitors. You can't pick a conservative issue that Texas hasn't led on, and all of that has happened since Dade Fuentes became Speaker of the Texas House.
When I hear you reel all of that off, I can, almost picture Democrats who are listening or watching this podcast just cringing at those different issues that you're talking about there. They might not be too sad to sit there on the sidelines and watch what's happening here with these big money groups coming in and trying to decimate the Republican Party here in Texas. Have you heard from Democratic lawmakers about this, though? Do they share concerns about this and feel like they want to get something done on this?
No, I really haven't.
Do y'all talk much?
Do you have any Democratic friends?
Yeah, I mean, look, I am deeply conservative, but I will roll up my sleeves and I will work with anyone that wants to better the lives of Texans. And I think that that's the beauty of the Texas House, is that we can work together across party lines when the time is right. I had a bill this session that called the Reader Act. The courts have kind of messed up part of the bill. But we have now the first ever mandatory library standards in our public school libraries to make sure that pornographic material isn't there. And we had 10 Democrats come over and vote for that bill because I believe, number one, it was the right policy, but number two, because of relationships that we built across the aisle. Look, if you like your property tax cut and your homestead exemption that was expanded this time, if you're a retired teacher and you like the fact that we had a COLA, a cost of living adjustment for the first time in 2 decades, then you like the fact that Republicans and Democrats work together, because every constitutional amendment that passes in the Texas House requires 100 votes. Well, guess what? Since I've been in the House, we've had 83 and 86 Republicans. We don't have 100 Republicans. So we do work across party lines to do that. But no, on this issue, they are they end up being the big winners here. The Democratic Party ends up being the big winners with all the infighting.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, going into another contentious primary on March 5th here, what is this doing to the party? What does this threaten to do to the party if it continues?
Well, thank God for Governor Abbott and for Speaker Phelan, who have, cycle after cycle invested millions of dollars in bringing back, a majority of the Texas House. My first election in 2018 is when we lost 12 Republican seats. They had 95 Republicans the session before I got to Austin, and 83 my first 2 sessions in the House. And if you recall, back in 2020, during the presidential election, obviously the number one race on the ballot for everybody across the country was the presidential election. But the second biggest race in the nation was whether or not the Texas House was going to flip blue.
I remember that.
If not for Governor Abbott and Speaker Phelan investing millions of dollars, Speaker Bonin as well at the time, investing millions of dollars in these last 2 cycles, it may have flipped.
So this is just huge piles of money versus huge piles of money, and elections are getting more expensive.
That's right, absolutely. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where we can't rely on the Republican Party of Texas to actually defend Republican primary seat, or I'm sorry, not primary, but general election seats.
Why not?
Well, they don't have any money. They don't seem to have a plan. Their only investors seem to be, the West Texas guys at this point. I think we started seeing that when Alan West took over the state party, ran it into the ground like he's done so many other entities.
And he's running for Dallas County GOP chair right now.
And then now we have Matt Rinaldi, who was a 2-term, state representative who is aligned with the Defend Texas Liberty PAC. And these folks would rather oppose Republicans than oppose Democrats.
So wait, so the party itself, you're saying, the Texas Republican Party doesn't really represent the party?
No, not the members of the Republican Party. I'm just talking about corporately, the folks at the top that are running the party. I'm not talking about, your Republicans who go to Republican clubs.
Yeah, I mean the party apparatus.
Your delegates.
The actual party apparatus is not, you're saying it doesn't really represent the party.
No, I mean, I think that if you look at the chairman specifically, I think that he has made it a point to oppose, he opposed Governor Abbott in the primary. He opposes Dade Phelan. He opposes pretty much any Republican that's ever done anything in the Texas House.
That's surprising from the Republican Party of Texas chairman to see those positions. So this group of 5, they have lots of money. They make lots of noise. They have us talking in this episode here too. Mm-hmm. They haven't had the best record so far in candidates they've endorsed. We saw most recently House District 2, 3, Jill Dutton versus Brent Money in Hunt County, Hopkins County, Van Zant County, Northeast Texas. That group of 5 was aligned behind Brent Money, mm-hmm. and Jill Dutton had former Governor Rick Perry, House Speaker Dade Phelan behind her. She ended up winning a very close race by 100 points.
That's right.
What does that say about the state of the party?
Well, I think what it says is that voters are smart, and all politics is local. Jill's a great candidate. She's a great member of her community, former school board member. She ran a Republican club, and that's why I say, it's not Republicans. It's just a handful of people at the top. But she's a great candidate. She worked her butt off. She knocked doors. She talked to voters. She went to events, and she did the work that was required to win. And I think at the end of the day, that's why you're seeing so many of these lies really ramp up against incumbents this year, more so than ever before, because what they're doing isn't working. Speaker Phelan was 34-0 last cycle against this group.
Does this stop after the primary, or what happens? What happens if this big money opposes you in the primary, you still somehow slug it out and win in the primary, and now you're going on to the general election in November? Let's say you're facing a Democrat or an independent or who knows what. Does it stop after the primary?
Well, what's crazy is that a couple of years ago, we actually saw mail pieces hit in districts well after the primary against several Republican incumbents.
After the primary?
After the
What's
primary
the
from these groups. Well, because they make, I'm telling you, this isn't about politics. It's not about policy. It's about money. They make money on every single one of these mail pieces, every single
How?
text that goes out.
I don't understand that.
Well, like any political consultant, they get paid and I'm sure that they have a little percentage, on each mail piece that they get, that's the root of this. It's not about policy. Look, since we ended abortion in Texas, took abortion from 50,000 abortions to 34 in the state of Texas, the attacks have only ramped up. Since we passed constitutional carry for the first time since Reconstruction, you no longer have to ask the government for permission to carry a firearm. The attacks have ramped up. Since we passed the strongest election integrity bill, a bill that was so strong that the Democrats fled to Washington, D.C. to try to stop. Since we passed that, the attacks have ramped up.
But the attacks have ramped up from the right, which is, I'm still picking my head on that. I don't get it, because these are conservative priorities that you guys have fought for a long time, that people thought open carry wasn't going to happen. No way. And then all of a sudden it happens. Why are these attacks ramping up? Money?
Because it's not about policy. None of this is policy driven. If it was policy driven, people would be lining up behind Speaker Phelan and all of these incumbent Republican legislators who have done the Lord's work on so many issues. I mean, again, legacy wins. I'm not talking about just good policy.
Right.
Legacy wins. I would ask you this. Pick your favorite Congress member or U.S. Senator out of the entire country, and I'll give you the last 30 years. Tell me the 3 most conservative policies that they have passed in the United States Congress over the last 30 years, and I'll let you pick one of the last 2 sessions, and we'll smoke them. It's not even close. Congress does nothing. The Texas House and the Texas Senate does conservative win after conservative win, yet all the money and focus is on the Texas House.
So there's this infighting then in the party, and regardless of what's causing it, whether it's money or just this desire on the part of some people to just burn it all down, or if it is policy, there is this fight that's taking place within the party. And I don't know what y'all's super secretive text back and forth said, when y'all were talking about what we'd talk about
Your
today.
beer choices, man.
But a big thing on my mind, it is a good one. A big thing on my mind that I wanted to ask you about is Ken Paxton.
Yeah.
Because it's an elephant in the room, and I think it's also at least it's almost a spark, I guess, that continues this battle going within the party, because this was hard within the party. This whole issue the past year. You voted to impeach Paxton, along with many other Republicans in the House. Do you look back on that now still and believe that that was the right call?
I have absolutely no regrets. I sleep very well at night knowing that what we did was the right thing for the state of Texas. Keep in mind, it wasn't just the Ken Paxton thing. We also expelled, which led to the House District 2 special election, a Republican House member that got his 19-year-old intern drunk and did some things there. So, yeah, I mean, I think that if you look at what we've done in the Texas House, especially under Speaker Phelan's leadership, it's that I think his motto, if it's not, it should be, is do right and risk the consequences. And that's what we've done.
It's an extraordinary moment.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And look, it's nothing that we took lightly. I mean, the weight of both of those things. Yeah. The only thing that I could compare it to is when we passed the Heartbeat Act, just the weight of that moment of knowing, of the lives that we could save there. But politically, and just historically, the weight of those 2 decisions were very heavy. And as we sit here and record this today, Ken Paxton should be being deposed in Austin and answering questions for the very first time under oath about all of these allegations against him. Yet for the 13th time, he has a legal ploy that his attorneys have done to remove himself from having to answer questions under oath. And as we record this today, he should be being deposed and answering questions under oath. He refuses to do so.
The state Supreme Court sort of sided with him and put that on hold, whether he'll have to do a deposition as they, figure out the merits of his argument there. Basically, there's still this whistleblower case, these top deputies who were in his office who reported him to the FBI, who were fired, who say that they were wrongfully terminated. They filed this whistleblower lawsuit. That's at the heart of the whole impeachment. Absolutely. There. And the really interesting thing is, Paxton came out recently and said, you know what, I'm not going to contest any of the facts that are in that lawsuit anymore. Let's just go ahead and, get this trial over with, get it out of the way, and get to the settlement. These are the facts that were at the heart of the impeachment, though. If he says, I'm not going to contest that anymore, this is a guy, by the way, who fights everything.
Yes.
If he says, I'm not going to contest that anymore, one Republican senator who's retiring says we should reopen the trial now.
Yes.
Should that be reopened?
If there's
impeachment trial
way to do it, then absolutely. I don't know logistically how that works, but look, Ken Paxton admitted to 4 of the articles of impeachment. Look, when I came home and I started talking to people about the Ken Paxton impeachment, because so much money was spent by the Defend Texas Liberty PAC group, putting out all this misinformation about what it was. Most people thought that this was about the 2014, 2015 securities fraud stuff. That was 4 of the 20 charges against Paxton. These whistleblower charges are at the root of all of it. And what people need to remember is that these were hand-picked, conservative, stalwart, well-known in the conservative legal community of being rock star conservatives that were hand-picked by Paxton to lead different divisions. And at the height of COVID-19, when everybody's running all over the place trying to figure out, what to do and getting our kids okay and back in school and no mask requirements and all these things on the conservative side, keeping businesses open, all that stuff, it seemed that the majority of the work in the Ken Paxton office was protecting this guy, Nate Paul, and not only protecting him, but hiring outside counsel, a guy with only 5 years of experience, to partner with Nate Paul's attorney to go not only write subpoenas, but deliver subpoenas to people that were investigating or turning in Nate Paul to law enforcement. And it's like, wait a minute, we're at the height of COVID, and this is what the Office of the Attorney General, well, they start trading notes in the different divisions and figure out what's going on. They go to the FBI and report Ken Paxton. The reason we have whistleblower protections in this state is so that the powerful politicians cannot be corrupt without accountability. Those people should have been protected in their jobs according to the law. And when Ken Paxton took about 45 days to either fire or constructively remove them from their positions, he broke the law. That's what this whole case started on. Now, what he's saying now, even though he's said, I'm completely innocent the whole time, though not under oath, what he's saying now is, look, those guys are right. I'm not even going to fight it. Whatever they say goes, and judge, whatever settlement that you want to come up with that, oh, by the way, the taxpayers have to fund, whatever number that is, not 3.3 million, it could be 20 million. Whatever number you come up with, I'm good with. I'm just going to let you have it. That is remarkable. The fact.
What was your reaction when you saw that Paxton wasn't fighting this?
I just disgusted, astounded, and every single day, it's gotten so repetitive now that almost every single day, the entire focus of the Office of the Attorney General is about how to protect Ken Paxton from answering any question whatsoever under oath. And look, this is not about him being a Republican or me agreeing or disagreeing with the things that he's done with the Biden administration or others. Myself, other members of the Texas House that have campaigned for Ken Paxton, that have supported Ken Paxton, that have, done all of these things. I don't understand how a Republican can look at someone in the Democratic Party and point our finger at them and saying that person is corrupt if we can't do the same within our own party.
Do you expect the House of Representatives, if there's a judgment in this case, not a settlement, but a judgment in this case, do you expect the House of Representatives is going to pay that on behalf of Ken Paxton?
Well, I can't.
To those whistleblowers.
I can't speak on behalf of all of my colleagues, but I'll tell you what I would support. I would support, those guys were wronged. Ken Paxton broke the Whistleblower Act. What he did was wrong, and those guys were wrong. A lot of them, their reputations have been sullied because of this and all kinds of things. So I would support some type of settlement agreement only after Ken Paxton answers questions under oath about everything that happened.
Do you think that there is any appetite, when you're in these text threads with other members, is there any appetite at all for this House to go through the impeachment proceedings again and not wait for the Senate to reopen a trial?
Well, we haven't really talked about that. I mean, most of what we're talking about, this one thread that we've got where we're talking about the campaign stuff is about, hey, how many doors have you knocked on? Great, good job. What lies are you seeing in your district? What's going on here? We're sharing information like that. But
will focus come back to this, though, do you think?
I think time will tell. Ken Paxton will, I believe, eventually be deposed. He will have to answer questions under oath on the whistleblower suit. He hasn't had to yet. But, look, time is not on his side. He's got the securities fraud thing coming up in April. The FBI is investigating him on the bribery charges. I know for a fact that they are interviewing multiple people all around Austin that are involved with, not involved with that, but know about things.
People in the legislature?
I know of people in Austin that are being interviewed by the FBI, and so it's like,
the grand jury or the FBI? The grand jury in San Antonio?
The FBI specifically. Okay. I mean, look, the noose is getting tighter. It's a matter of time. And look, I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this year that, Ken Paxton's on an island somewhere cashing out his campaign account and, trying to skirt law enforcement. I think the best case scenario.
You think he would take off? I mean, literally, you think he'd take off?
He's facing life in prison. I mean, these securities fraud charges are, it's real deal. I mean,
but
it's
you think the Attorney
stuff.
General is a flight risk?
I absolutely do. I mean, look, he's gone all over the world. He went to China whenever everyone said, do not go on this trip to China. He's been all over Europe. He's never disclosed how those European trips were paid for. He's now come to light that he's got multiple homes and investment properties all over the United States that he somehow bought with $150,000 a year salary. And, he's got all this stuff that's never been reported. He still hasn't reported his personal financial statement, which, by the way, is due February 12th again this year, that we file every single year. So there are major, major legal implications for him. And I wouldn't be surprised by anything at this point.
You were with the majority of Republican House members who voted to impeach. Mm-hmm. It makes its way over to the Senate in Texas. Only 2 Republicans voted to convict. The majority voted to acquit. Did they get it wrong here?
Look, I think if you look at the trial, we couldn't call the top 6 people involved in the conspiracy. We couldn't call Ken Paxton. We couldn't call Angela Paxton. We couldn't call Nate Paul. We couldn't call the mistress. We couldn't call the guy that did the work on the house or the guy that owned the contracting business, that was ultimately tied to Nate Paul. We couldn't call the top 6 people.
Now, you say you couldn't call. Some of those could have been called if the rulings had been different there in the Senate. Did they get that wrong?
Yeah, look, I think that the trial was difficult for a number of reasons, and I think that was the main reason that it was difficult, because we were not either allowed or unable to call the top 6 people involved. But yeah, look, I wouldn't have put it forward if I didn't think that it was the right thing to do. And having watched almost every single minute of the trial, I believe that we proved without a shadow of a doubt that there was an issue there.
Have you said anything to those senators who voted to acquit, who, GOP senators who no doubt have relationships
I've talked
with?
to a few of them, but I haven't talked to by any large number of state senators by any stretch. But look, the whole thing about, no evidence and all this stuff, we submitted thousands of pages of evidence. And I want to talk about one briefly, if that's okay. The day that the whistleblowers went to the FBI, that day, and they come back and report to Ken Paxton that they went to the FBI, he just magically decides 4 hours later to pay the bill to the contractor after having been in the house for nearly 3 months.
For work done on his own home in Austin.
Yeah, $120,000 or $150,000.
That had been done months prior.
That had been done. He'd already been in the house almost 3 months. He pays it that day. And oh, by the way, the metadata proved that the invoice wasn't even generated until the early morning hours of the day after the whistleblowers went to the FBI.
Yeah.
And it was never actually sent to Ken Paxton.
And explain the allegation, because it was kind of deep here. The allegation is that he was getting things for free because of who he was. He was trading stuff out, essentially.
That's right. And essentially he got all of these repairs done to his house and all of this stuff, well over $100,000 worth of work without having to pay for it by Nate Paul.
And he paid for it after the whistleblowers went to
Absolutely.
And it was this businessman who he was helping.
Absolutely. And so, and by the way, this guy who is also up against life in prison because of bank fraud and all sorts of things, that he's allegedly done. And so, this whole web of things, there was so much evidence there, but look, it was a political trial. We got a political result.
When I hear you talk about this and I hear the vote that you took, I'm amazed that you don't have a primary opponent. How did you escape that? Wasn't there supposed to be sort of this revenge tour? We've seen it with some members.
Yeah.
You're a Collin County rep. Why aren't you in the crosshairs?
Yeah, I'm on the Collin County line. I'm wholly within Denton County, but I live in Frisco. But yeah, look, we're in what a lot of people would think of as Paxton country. I had a primary opponent announced, and after Ken Paxton endorsed her, she dropped out. I don't know why. I've never spoken with her. I didn't even know why she was running, but I did have a primary opponent for a little while. I think had she dropped out sooner, I probably would have had someone else, jump up. As we've seen in many of these other races, there are very few Republicans in our region without a primary opponent.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier in the episode here about Congress, and I don't think whichever party you might align yourself with, or if you're an independent, I think we could all agree Congress isn't doing a whole heck of a lot right now. They got infrastructure passed, which was a big deal. But when it comes to the border, they keep kicking that thing down the road. When it comes to government funding, they kick it down the road. You mentioned, and it has been discussed, that you kind of got into it with a Republican member of Congress on X recently. That was Beth Van Dyne from Irving. She's a fellow Republican. What was that about? And she's not the only one. She's more representative, I think, of the frustration you have with Congress.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I'm a big Beth Van Dyne fan. I think she did a great job as mayor of Irving. I supported her run, for Congress. So this was, and we even said in our Twitter exchange or X exchange that this isn't about you specifically, but all these Republican Congress members come down to the border and have their little press conference down there and have all this tough talk, and it just honestly pisses me off because no one in Congress does anything to help anybody but themselves. And I'm just disgusted by the whole lot of them. All 400 and however many of them there are in Congress, they never do anything. I can't point to 3 conservative policy wins that Congress has put forward in my adult lifetime that has bettered my life or my family. I just can't. I mean, we had the Trump tax cuts that Trump led on, but what is Congress doing about anything? The Republican Congress right now, to me, appears to be funding the Biden administration's efforts in everything that they do. I say shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it all down. Absolutely. I mean, what are they doing that is helping anyone? I mean, look, and when you have a government shutdown, there's things that still happen, right? I mean, people still get their Social Security checks and that sort of thing. So you're not talking about taking money.
But you wouldn't pay Border Patrol. You wouldn't pay military. There's a number of things you wouldn't actually fund salaries for.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? At the end of the day, Border Patrol's down there under orders of the Biden administration, cutting our razor wire, getting industrial forklifts.
That's under the Supreme Court. That's under the Supreme Court order.
Well, it is now, but before that, it was the Biden administration telling them to do that. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I would rather Congress shut down to weaken the Biden administration than continue to funding his efforts all over the world. Really, I mean, look at the world. The world is burning down around us with Joe Biden in office. What is Congress doing?
But if they shut it down, there still wouldn't be anything going on. You still wouldn't be getting anything done.
Absolutely,
right?
Man. We could save a few bucks. I mean, if they're not going to do anything anyways.
Let me ask you this. Focusing back on the border there, there's this, we've got this Oklahoma Republican, Senator Langford, who's been in these negotiations about this border bill. The talk on Capitol Hill is that this is the most sweeping change on the border, the toughest border restrictions that we would see in a generation. And now that the Republican-led House is balking, saying, you know what, we're not going to support that. We're going to wait. We're going to let the election play out and see if maybe, we can get Trump back in office and do something different. Do you support that?
I don't understand why we need a new bill to enforce the laws that are on the books. We have a border. We have folks streaming across this border, victims of human trafficking. Some folks wanting to just get a better life. 300 terrorists on the terror watch list. A lot of folks that have done some really bad things in this country, all sorts of people flooding across the southern border. In addition to that, a record amount of drugs coming across. We've stopped more fentanyl coming across the southern border than would kill every man, woman, and child in the United States. And the laws on the books that they have right now today can stop all of it tomorrow.
But if they have a bill that goes further than the laws that are on the books right now, is it a good idea
Does it go further? I mean, what is going further than shutting the border down and not allowing anyone to cross, which they have the ability to do right now. Joe Biden has the ability right now today to shut it down and to only have our ports of entry open, to have bigger checks through the ports of entry, because that's where a lot of the drugs are coming through, is actually our ports of entry. Yeah. He has the ability to shut that down today. We don't need a new law. Now look, if there's something in there, I haven't read it.
It's not done yet, so you're not missing anything.
Yeah, so I mean, if there's something in there that makes it better, but if they're not going to enforce the laws that are on the books, what's another piece of paper with words on it going to do?
It's bipartisan, though. Let me ask you this, because you and I talked about this, and I didn't realize this. You were talking about how Texas has done more than Congress has, and you mentioned something that I didn't realize, that Texas has built more of the border fence in the past few years than Trump did during his entire White House administration.
That's right. Of course, he had to get off the ground and running, and he only had 4 years. But yeah, I mean, Texas is either built or has under construction more border wall than was built during the Trump administration. And that's border wall, and that doesn't include, the buoys or the razor wire or the 3,000 cameras that we have along the border or the military vehicles that are lined up in certain places to route people, to different areas. We have done that under Governor Abbott's leadership, under the appropriations that we've made. Look, when I was first running for office, we were spending about $500 million on border security, which is a big number.
It's
$500 million that should be going to roads and schools and healthcare. But instead, it's not $500 million anymore. It's $6.6 billion that we appropriated this last year under Dade Fuentes' leadership for the biennium, to build the wall, to install the razor wire, to pay for the National Guard and State Guard and DPS troopers that are down there. $6.6 billion. And what I ask our members of Congress are, where do we send the bill?
Now, if the Supreme Court, it's a conservative court, if they say, roll back this and this and this that you're doing, as we saw recently, there's some who are arguing, including Chip Roy here in Texas, just don't listen to them. Ignore them.
Mm-hmm. Well, what the Supreme Court actually said is that you can't prevent
Border Patrol,
the feds from removing it. They didn't say that you can't put it there. They didn't say that you have to remove it. They said you can't prevent them.
But what do you think of that thought of just saying, if we don't like this ruling, we don't have to listen to it?
Look, I'm a law and order guy, but we believe that we have the constitutional right to defend ourselves and defend our state and defend this nation. And we're doing that in more of a way than any other state ever has in the history of the United States. And if you look at it, the feds don't have the authority to just go wherever they want to go. This is specifically in Shelby Park, which is a city park. It's not federal lands. The state of Texas cannot go onto federal lands, the federal border, without being invited in. The federal government can't just come in and do whatever they want, wherever they want. State lands, private property where we're allowed to come in, we're building the wall, we're putting up razor wire, we're doing these things, and there's not a thing that the federal government can do about it.
Let me ask you, the $6.6 billion, I mean, that number's gone up a lot, from $500 million to $2 billion. Now it's $3.3 billion, I think, for each year is how much Texas taxpayers are paying. I hear that number, and I've asked different state leaders about this. We're spending all this money down there that you say that could be going to different places. The issue is still happening. Yep. Is this really anything more than politics, though?
I think that it is. I mean,
but
I
how
think that
so?
it is
I mean,
more.
we keep throwing money down there, and you still have this many people coming across. We have all these cameras. We have all these state troopers. They're keeping the economies of Laredo and McAllen alive, and really boosting them. But there's still people coming across.
Well, it's better than doing nothing. It's like, it's like having a cut on your leg and saying, well, should I put a Band-Aid on it or not, because it's not going to heal overnight. I would rather have some Neosporin and a Band-Aid on that thing and let it heal up faster. And ultimately, that's what we're doing at the border. We are stemming the tide. We are doing things. Is it solving the problem? No, we don't have the capacity. We'd have to spend our entire state budget to do what needs to be done on the border. And we can't defund our public schools and defund our transportation system and all these key services that we do as a state to do that. So we need the federal government to come in, but to say that the money's not working when we, the state of Texas, have stopped more fentanyl than would kill every man, woman, and child in the United States. And that's just one of the many drugs that we've gotten and pulled off, coming across the southern border. The human trafficking, the folks on the terror watch list, we are having an impact. Is it solving the whole problem? No, it's not. But we are having an impact, and we are helping provide a solution to a piece of the border problem. But we are in desperate need of a change in Washington, D.C. to have people on both parties step up and say, enough is enough. We're going to shut it down.
Okay, so this is going to be a big issue coming up in the legislative session, which is right around the corner.
Absolutely.
In at least in your world, in 2025, the beginning of 2025. My question is, how confident are you, if you had to put a percentage on it, that Dade Fuentes is going to return as Speaker of the House? That's a tough job to hang on to in normal times. These aren't normal times, though. There's a lot of infighting.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's just shy of 100%. I don't think that there's any problem whatsoever. Dade Fuentes is going to win a significant race here in the primary against this guy that was a little wannabe, Dade Fuentes presenting him with awards and being at his campaign booths. And then all of a sudden he saw the money part of it and thought, I can raise my profile by running against the speaker. He's going to have no problem with David Covey down there. He's going to be back, and he'll be overwhelmingly elected by the Republican caucus to be our nominee for speaker. And when you're in the Republican caucus, now after the rules have been changed several years ago to make sure that we have a conservative speaker that is elected by Republicans, we're all going to go to the floor and we're going to vote for Dade Fuentes for speaker.
And Fuentes got a lot of Democratic votes as well. I mean, it was unanimous, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, look,
there may have been a few Republicans that shed off.
When Dade Fuentes was first basically drafted to be the speaker, it was by the center-right group within the House. I mean, it was the center-right group, and everybody says, these Democrats came on board and this and that. And it's like, because they could do math. Once he got to about 50 Republicans in the Texas House, they saw who was going to be the guy.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, what every legislator wants is the ability to be reelected. And why put yourself in the corner without any capacity to do anything and, challenge somebody that's going to be the guy? The Republicans and the conservative wing of the party put Dade Fuentes in that position. And so that's the way it went down.
Before you even get there, are you going to have another special session?
I don't know. I mean, that's for, Governor Abbott to decide.
How many are we up to now? 5?
Yeah, well, we've had 4, and
So
set a record last year, plus the trial. But, at the end of the day, that's Governor Abbott's decision to make. I'm ready, willing, and able to go back into work for the people that I represent whenever he calls us. I wouldn't
He hasn't been able to get this school voucher thing to go through, and it's Republicans, rural Republicans, that's always hard to say.
Rural.
Yeah.
He can't pronounce
Republicans,
rural.
Who have been holding that up. And of course, the governor's spending a lot of money now, too, picking some candidates in the primary to try to overcome that, or, depending on how you look at it, revenge.
Yeah. Look, it's a tough issue, I think, for a lot of us, because hardly anybody campaigns on that issue.
Yeah.
It's not like guns and abortion where it's like, even if you're a weak Republican, if we can get it to the floor, they're like, crap, I've got to vote for that, right? Well, school choice is not that way. I mean, it is a tough issue. I fundamentally believe in the rights for parents to choose the education that's best for their student. I fundamentally believe that, and I think a lot of Republicans do. But, it takes time for a lot of Republicans to go out to talk to people in their districts about an issue, to figure out where people are. That's the beauty of knocking on doors in your district, is you get face-to-face feedback. And this is a tough issue because most people don't campaign on it. I believe that we'll be in a position next session to pass a school choice bill.
It's been said before a lot of sessions.
You think so, though?
I think so. I'm very confident in it. But
what's going to change, though?
Well, what changes, number one, you got the most popular politician in the state going around the state talking to people about
Governor
it.
But he did that last year before the votes.
But none of the reps did, and he really did that during session. I mean, it wasn't the talk of the town coming into last session. It wasn't. It was border security and property taxes.
Do you think another thing that's going to change is some of the people who are doing the voting there under the dome? Do you think that some people are going to lose their jobs because they didn't vote the right way in the governor's mind on that issue?
Well, they
and
may.
He's funding their opponents?
They may, but I think the bigger thing is some of the retirements that we saw in the Texas House this cycle. I mean, multiple people retiring that did not support it for whatever reason. But look, again, I think this is a policy that Republicans have to get their arms around and be comfortable about, and realize that you can be pro-public education because that's where 97% of the kids are going to go, and also support a parent's right to choose a different path if that's what's best for their family. I just think that is something that takes getting your arms around, mainly because the teachers' unions and the forces against it have put so much misinformation out there about what the legislation actually would have done.
Well, and the thing is that these things have been tied together now, too. Mm-hmm. So we haven't seen an increase in the amount of money the state sets aside for each public school student for several years now, even through inflation. And, there was all this talk about teacher pay raises. We didn't see that in this past session either, because these issues have been tied together now. Do you think those stay tied together, and that one has to, that the vouchers have to pass for the other things to get done?
A couple of things about that. I mean, number one, we did invest billions of additional dollars in our public education system. We fully funded enrollment growth. We fully funded a lot of these things, that helped our public schools.
It
wasn't as much as they wanted.
Still stayed the same.
Well, they want to increase the basic allotment up to a higher amount, but there's other ways to adjust education funding without just doing the basic allotment. And look, the legislature doesn't dictate teacher pay. That is a district by district thing.
Right.
The only reason that we're talking about teacher pay at the state level is because school administrators can't be trusted not to keep too much of the money themselves. When we talk about teacher pay in the legislature, we're talking about earmarking money that has to go to teacher pay,
right,
so that the administrators don't do it. If we had teachers being paid the same percentage of the money that the schools get from the mid-1990s to today, they would each have a $15,000 pay raise, every teacher in Texas. But more and more of the money gets sucked up by an ever-growing administrative burden in these public schools, and so that money doesn't flow down. So when we talk about teacher pay in the legislature, it's earmarking dollars for that. Every school district in Texas has the ability to raise teacher pay, even some teachers up to six figures, if they want to draw down those dollars to do so.
Let me ask you about one more issue, and this is the reason we had you on the original podcast, and that was about your bill to regulate social media and keep people under 18 off social media. I believe it was 18, maybe it was 16. Florida just made national headlines for actually doing this.
Yes.
Are we going to see that again from you, where Texas is going to consider this?
Yeah, look, I mean, I was so excited to play a role in the House this session. I had two speaker priority bills, related to protecting our National Guard and protecting kids from pornography in school. The third issue that became a speaker priority bill that I actually didn't carry myself was the SCOPE Act, and it actually provided some protections online for parents to be able to control their kids' social media accounts to some extent. And that was a good step in the right direction. But I think what you're seeing, and this goes back to that bipartisan discussion that we had earlier, I was able to work across the aisle with Democrats and Republicans to get some of this policy shape that ultimately didn't pass. But you're also seeing it nationally. You have Governor Ron DeSantis leading on this issue on protecting kids from the harms of social media. You have New York City Mayor Eric Adams, I believe is his name, that is also talking about doing something to protect kids from social media.
Congress is talking about it now.
Congress
too.
is talking. Yeah, I have no hopes that they're going to do anything. But look, at the end of the day, our kids are killing themselves at a clip that we have never seen in the history of this country. Self-harm, suicide rates were going down, trending down until 2007. Since then, they've more than tripled. You know, if you look at these rabbit holes that girls get onto about anorexia and all these things, you've got all of these issues, all these mental health issues, and social media at the same time the suicide rates increase, the same time more and more kids are getting on social media. It is honestly the most dangerous thing that a parent can let their child have that is currently legal in the United States is access to social media.
Are we going to see a bill next session?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're going to continue to work on legislation around that, figure out, something didn't work last time, what's going to work this time. We've got to look at the case law around all that. We will have a bill this next session dealing with that issue in some capacity.
Here's my last question for you, and let's bring it back around to how we started this thing, and that is the group of five, as you call it. I call it the far right.
Sure.
But the group of five, far right, versus the traditional conservatives. Are my terms way off? Because this is kind of what I've been calling them for a long time.
Yeah,
here.
I mean, I do not believe that these guys are far right. I mean, I consider myself far right, and there is nothing that, I mean, I would
nothing
not
to
have
the right of you.
I would never have a 7-hour meeting with a Nazi.
Well,
I mean,
and that was Nick Fuentes with Defend Texas Liberty, and that's why they changed the name.
In fact, you had gotten money from that group before, and you gave it back.
Well, I'd gotten money from Jonathan Stickland, who was there in the meeting back in like 2017 or something, and so I donated that to the Friends of the Israeli Defense Force.
Yeah,
but here's my question. We're seeing the massive wedge and division inside the Republican Party of Texas. How does this end?
Look, we went 34-0 last cycle. I think the voters are smart. I think that they'll see through the lies of the division.
You say 34-0. It's those guys who are funding all this didn't get any of their candidates elected.
Versus who Speaker Phelan and the team were for versus Defend Texas Liberty PAC, 34-0 last cycle. We'll see what happens this cycle. But again, I have faith in the voters in this state that they'll see through these lies. But we also have to understand that we are in a different season and that it requires people to stand up and to speak the truth loudly, even when there's great cost to themselves, like I'm doing, like others are doing. Mano Diala down in the Houston area recently went on the news and talked about some of these lies. We have got to stand up and fight back. We've got to protect the House. It is a wonderful institution. One of the greatest institutions in the history of the nation is the Texas House of Representatives. The way that we are the voice of the people of this state and the way that we conduct our business deserves to be protected, and we need to protect it, and we need people to stand up and do that. And I'm willing to do it. I know a lot of other people that are willing to do it.
But these guys aren't going away. They have plenty of cash to keep toying with you guys forever and bringing their misfits out.
Absolutely, and we keep winning. And so, hopefully that'll be the case again this cycle. We just need people to see through the lies and see it for what it is. Our candidates have to work hard, and you know what? I think we're up to the challenge.
I hadn't seen that scoreboard, 34-0.
Last cycle.
How many potential races are there this time?
Well, there's 45 primaries. I don't know who all they're involved with.
Yeah.
And all of them, for example, Reggie Smith is a fantastic state rep up in Grayson County and a couple other counties. It's my home county. He's a great member. Shelley Luther is running in that race again. She's getting a lot of money from them. Reggie won by a wide margin last time. I believe that'll be the case again this time. So there's some that aren't as competitive as others, but remains to be seen. We'll see March 5th.
We'll have to see what that scoreboard looks like this time around. Interesting point there. Representative Dade Patterson, District 106, Denton County, largely, but you're in Frisco. Did we tick off everything from the text?
I think my beer's been gone for a while now because your questions are so long.
I think you finished that in about the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we'll have to have him on again. But hey, thanks for the insight here. And I'll be honest with you. We talk to a lot of lawmakers on the podcast. You're in a different situation, I think, because you don't have a primary candidate. But I don't think a lot of them are quite as candid as you are in the state of Austin, the state of the Republican Party of Texas right now. So we appreciate that insight.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.